Hi, this is Peter from Poser Labs, and in this video I would like to show you the Sentinel DAO that we've built for the February edition of the Superfluid Hackathon. This video is going to be divided into two parts. In the first part, I'm going to explain what a Sentinel is, how it all works under the hood, and what's the purpose of this DAO. And then in the second one, I'm going to show exactly how it's supposed to be used and what cool stuff you can do with it. But the first part is essential in order to understand what's happening behind the scenes. So let's start with the very first question. What even is a Sentinel? So you might be familiar with superfluid streams, where you can stream money directly into someone's wallet, and you can do that on pro rata basis, where each second a small portion is streamed to some wallet. And you can go to appsuperfluid.finance, and here you can send a stream to some external wallet. And once you do that, for example, let's say I want to stream 10 fake DAI tokens a month. There is this pop-up that says, to open the stream, I need to provide an additional buffer. So let me explain briefly why this buffer is necessary to open a stream. Basically, opening and closing a stream are two separate transactions that need to be sent out to the network. So once you open a stream, that's your opening transaction. But the protocol also needs to ensure that once the stream runs out of money, or once your account becomes insolvent, that the stream is also closed. Otherwise, you would be just creating money out of thin air, and we cannot have that, obviously. So that's why this is a sort of incentive either for you to close the stream and remember to do that, or if you fail to do that, it will be covered, your outgoing stream will be covered for a brief amount of time with this buffer, and then a Sentinel would be able to close it. And once the Sentinel closes the stream, he would be awarded with the remaining amount of that buffer that was set up during the opening. So you can basically think of a Sentinel as the closer of streams that have gone insolvent. And you can think of Sentinels in the Superfluid ecosystem similarly to validators in the Ethereum ecosystem or miners in the Bitcoin network. Basically, services that are essential and necessary to ensure that that the math checks out and that nothing suspicious is going on. One important thing to mention at this point is that for every super token, there is a separate Sentinel. So it's not like there is just this one unit that runs and covers everything. It's that for every super token, there is a separate Sentinel. So there's a separate one for DAI, a separate one for USDC, and a separate one for ETH. Similarly to validators on the Ethereum network. And speaking of tokens, we also have to mention different chains and networks. Polygon has a different set of validators than Optimism, than Arbitrum, and so on and so forth. So for each token on each chain, there is a different Sentinel. So there is quite a lot of them, ensuring that all the super tokens on all the networks are still solvent. So the next obvious question that comes into mind is, how can I become a Sentinel? And before I answer that, let me just mention that there are 3 Sentinel subgroups, but the one we are talking about in the context of this DAO is the Patrician, because he is the one that benefits the most and is most often the actual Sentinel that closes the streams. There are some other roles here, but they are not so important for our DAO. So in order to become a Sentinel, you need to put out some funds as a stake. And this works in a similar way as an Ethereum validator, where in the Ethereum ecosystem, if the validator messes something up or becomes malicious, his stake gets slashed. And this works in a similar manner here. So um, if I'm not closing the stream myself, this then becomes the responsibility of the Sentinel. And if he fails to do that, the stake that he has already put out is taken to cover the outgoing expenses of my stream. So he also has a quite a big incentive to close the stream on time. And if there is already a Sentinel in place, which is most often the case, you need to outbid them. And they have some stake in place, and you need to put up a higher stake than he already has. And to check how that looks like and how it works, you can go to toga.superfluid.finance, and you can see this neat dashboard, and it's available for all the um, different chains that you can find Superfluid on. So let's go to Girly for now, and let's take a look at the fake DAI token. So you can see that the current stake is just $5. And if you wanted to become the Sentinel, you would need to put up a higher stake than that. That would allow you to be the primary closer of the streams and to reap the rewards of doing that, the buffers that were put out. And here you can see a nice table that shows all the liquidations that are happening on this chain. So we can also filter them for our fake DAI token. And if you wonder why I'm just searching for some part of the address, it's because that a lot of people were apparently deploying some super tokens, and that just covers all of them. So the one that we're talking about here ends with AD00. So that's what I'm using. And yeah, here you can see the reward amounts for liquidating streams. This is obviously just the test network, but don't worry about that. We're gonna get to the live Polygon network in a second. Right, so that answers how to become a Sentinel. Then the next question is it even profitable to run a Sentinel? And this is not an easy question to answer, but we've tried our best. So you can think of the stake that you put out as your initial investment, and all the rewards that are piling up, you can think of them as the return on that investment. So from that, it becomes quite an easy calculation where you just sum all of the rewards over some period, for example, 1 week, and then extrapolate that period to a whole year. For example, if you're taking 1 week, year consists of 52 weeks, so we need to multiply that by 52, and then you divide that by the current stake, and that gives you the annual, the APR. So we've done some calculations for the Girly network, and you can see that obviously if the stake is so low as for the DAI token, that it's immensely profitable to become a Sentinel over here, but on the other hand, it's just fake tokens, so that's not any good. For that reason, we've also created a separate dashboard for the Polygon network, which is actually live and where you can become a Sentinel any minute now, and you can basically enjoy the high APR that is on here. For example, if we take a look at the 30-day APR that is projected for that we've summed up for DAI, you can see that it's over 1500%. And now let's get to the details of that, and let me explain to you why it's probably so high. So the calculation of the APR is not so straightforward as just summing up those rewards and doing this calculation. there is actually a little bit more to it. There are also some other factors that you need to consider. So let's take Matic X, for example, the super token for Matic. When you go to the Toga dashboard, you can see the recent liquidations for that token. And for example, let's just take the latest one. You can see that the reward for liquidating the stream was very tiny. You could even say minuscule. It's like 0.006. So that's not really much. But it was actually a transaction that had to be sent out to the network and so had to be also paid for. So when you go to Polygon Scan and you take a closer look at that transaction, you can see that it actually cost 0.08 Matic tokens, or 11 cents in terms of dollars, to send out this transaction. So it has cost you this much, or the Sentinel, but you've only profited this much. So this means this was an unprofitable transaction. And if you go down the line, you can actually see quite a lot of those. So, for example, this one would probably be profitable because the average cost is a little bit lower than 0.14. But those other ones that start with three leading zeros, they're probably not so profitable. But you also have to close those streams because otherwise the outgoing costs would be covered from your stake. So we've decided to also take those into account, not into the account of the actual APR. That would be a little tricky to calculate, but we wanted to show that it's also taken into account on this dashboard. And you can actually see that, for example, for Ethereum, 100% of those transactions are unprofitable. So we can check that by going here and searching for ETHX. And then you can see the stake. And if you search that for here as well, you can see that you have really lots of transactions that don't even have any rewards, or where they are so tiny that you need the other notation type to show them. So not every transaction on every token is profitable. It's important to mention that we are only aggregating the data from the last 30 days. So you can see that this super token only had one liquidation for the month of February so far, and the previous ones are in January. So we would only consider in this dashboard that we've created here, we only consider transactions that go back a month. So for example, we wouldn't consider, I'm just trying to find a bigger one, for ETH that's actually maybe quite big, but this is so far back that we don't consider it on the dashboard. So those are the unprofitable transactions, and obviously you would like that number to be as low as possible. But fortunately, on the other hand, there are also very profitable transactions that we have called jackpots. And we wanted to show that for a bunch of unprofitable transactions, there is one or two that completely covers the costs of the unprofitable ones, and we're just calling them jackpots. So conversely, also you would like to have that number as high as possible. And a good example of that would be the transactions for this one transaction for the DAI super token on Polygon. So this one liquidation profited the Sentinel almost $48. So you can see that it wasn't included in the APR for this week because it was at the beginning of the month. It was on the 4th of February, but it's still included in the 30 days calculation. So you can see that it definitely varies, and you need to uh, consider a wider time frame um, if you would like to invest your funds in a Sentinel. Right, so far we've taken a look at what a Sentinel is, how to become a Sentinel, and how profitable it is to run one. But now let's take a look at the second part of our project, namely the DAO, and why we believe it's necessary. So consider the following scenarios that could be taking place right now without the DAO. Let's say you've got Alice here and you've got Bob. And Alice is the current Sentinel and has put up for stake $1,000, and the current APR is 12%, which is a fair estimate considering the different numbers among the stablecoins. So let's say it's 12%, and she's still got $9,000 left over that she has at her disposal. And then you've got Bob that also wants to become the Sentinel, and he's got $10,000 as well. So um, Bob goes ahead and outbids Alice, and now he is the Sentinel, and the stake that he's put out, it had to be bigger than 1,000, so he decided to put out $2,000. So now Alice isn't the Sentinel, Bob is, and the APR has dropped to 6% because the number of rewards that are being accumulated is still the same. That's constant. That doesn't change. But what has changed is the initial investment. It got bigger. So that's why the APR dropped. That's You can take a closer look at the formula, but you can clearly see that as the stake gets bigger, the denominator gets bigger, and this means the APR gets lower. And that, of course, also makes sense if you have, let's say, $100 worth of rewards every month. It plays a significant difference if you have only $50 at stake or if you have $11,000 at stake. So as the APR, as the stake gets bigger, the APR gets lower, and that we also see here. So Alice realizes that she's been outbid, her funds have been returned to her, and she still considers APR of 6% to be high enough to fight for it, and she goes ahead and outbids Bob. And now she's the Sentinel again, the APR has dropped again, and Bob also still has his funds, and he also wants to become a Sentinel. So this bidding continues, and we arrive at a point one day where only one of them is the Sentinel, and they're all out of money because they've outbid their competitor with all their available funds, and the APR has dropped significantly in comparison to what it's been at first. So this isn't really a desirable state to neither Bob nor Alice, even though Bob is the current Sentinel. When you compare what he's been presented with at first, 12% APR, and what he has right now, it's 10 times less. And he's also had to put out his entire stake to outbid his competitor. And also Alice isn't happy either because she doesn't get to enjoy the Sentinel profits. She's left over with her funds, and that's it. So this is one scenario where potential collaboration could improve this situation. But let's talk about scenario two now. Let's say you also have Alice, who is the current Sentinel, and she's got $1,000 at stake. And you have two other players, Bob and Carol, both of whom have $600 each, and both of them want to become a Sentinel. Obviously, 600 is less than $1,000, so neither of them can become a Sentinel on their own. One thing they could, however, do is pool their funds together. So let's say that's what happens, and Carol transfers their funds over to Bob. And now Bob is sort of a custodian for Carol, and he's got $1,200. So now he's able to outbid Alice. But also, Carol doesn't really have any control over his money. He's just transferred it to Bob because he trusts him on some sort of level, but he isn't in control anymore of his own money, basically. So now um, Bob outbids Alice, and we also have three people that are maybe relatively not as happy because Alice isn't the Sentinel anymore. Bob, while being the Sentinel, he has to take care of not only his own money, but he's also responsible for Carol's money. And Carol also maybe feels a little uncomfortable knowing that Bob is in control of his funds and could maybe do some malicious actions. So also this situation isn't ideal for any of them. And also let's consider another scenario where we don't look at the stake itself for a sec, but we have a person that could potentially become a sentinel, but considers all the technical trouble too much because you have to run a sentinel unit. It perhaps needs to be redundant in case you have some outage. It needs to be secure. You also need to um, be able to monitor your wallet somehow in case the native token drops below a certain level. You need to top it out periodically. So that's a lot of hassle. And Alice decides that's just too much to her. And even though she potentially could invest and be a sentinel in terms of funding and available funds, she decides against that because it's just too much of a headache to her, and she doesn't do anything with that. So now let's keep in mind all those three scenarios, how they look like in the current setup without a DAO possibility. And now let's take a look how they would change once we have a DAO in place. So first of all, if you have two people and both of them want to become a sentinel really badly, what they could do is they could talk to each other and agree, hey, we could either go into a bidding war and outbid ourselves up until a point where the APR drops to such a low level that it's not even worth bidding for anymore, and invest all of our money into this, or we could create a DAO where each of us gives the funds that they're fine with, for example, $1,000 each, and we share the APR. And while the APR is lower for Alice, that's true, it isn't as low as if it were she to go into this bidding war against Bob. And uh, moreover, both of them now have $9,000 left that they can invest in some other um, endeavors in the DeFi space. So they get to share their APR. They're not constantly in this bidding war process, and they can enjoy some good returns on their money here. Now let's go over to the next scenario. Let's say you have three people. One of them is the Sentinel right now, and two of them have just enough funds to outbid the current Sentinel. So we could have two scenarios here. All three of them would form a DAO, and they would share that APR accordingly. So we would have a DAO with $2,200. Or Bob and Carol could form a DAO themselves, where each stay still in control of their funding, and they could outbid Alice as the DAO, and we would then have a mutually controlled stake of $1,200. So whether or not Alice decides to join the DAO or not, it's still a much better situation for all of them. And also in the third scenario, where we had a person who was kind of willing to invest but not really deal with the hassle of running a Sentinel, they can just join the DAO, and the DAO just takes care of the organizational part of this. Maybe some of the more tech-savvy users can run redundant instances, and there is a system set up, and there is the separation of responsibilities so that it's not too overwhelming for one single person, and that everyone can collaborate on this and share the rewards and also share the responsibilities. So all of this becomes possible once we can agree on a smart contract basis that it's worth to share that responsibility and share those rewards. Right, so I think those three scenarios illustrate pretty well why it's really beneficial to have some sort of system that allows multiple people to uh, invest in this Sentinel business at once. And then finally, if you would like to know some more about how Sentinels work, maybe if you would like to set your own Sentinel instance, here are some links to the Superfluid docs that you can explore, where the system of Sentinels and Picks and Pirates and Pleb and running a Sentinel unit is described in pretty in-depth detail. All right, I hope that by going through these questions, you now understand what a Sentinel is and how a DAO can be formed around it so that it benefits all DAO members and also the community as a whole. Right, please join me for the second part in which I explain all the DAO mechanics and how they work under the hood. See you there.